They tried to silence him just like his father, but the truth just exploded. This story was buried for years, until now. What they did to Jawara McIntosh will make your blood boil. You've been lied to about justice, and the smoking proof is here. Warning, you'll never listen to reggae the same way after this video. Jawara McIntosh had the misfortune of inheriting not just the immense musical legacy of his father, Peter Tosh, but also the heavy burden of tragedy and violence that seemed woven into their family story. It was not merely a continuation of reggae rhythms and Rastafarian beliefs that shaped his life, but a continuation of struggle, a harsh, brutal narrative that refused to loosen its grip, even across generations. Peter Tosh, the firebrand prophet of reggae music, had already laid down a path of resistance and defiance, one that Jawara would later follow with unwavering loyalty. Long before Jawara ever strummed his first chord or wrote his first lyrics, his father's voice rang through the decades with a soul-stirring demand to legalize it, a hymn for freedom and a battle cry against systemic oppression. Yet by the time that cry reached maturity in Jawara's ears, it was tinged with sorrow. For Peter Tosh had been murdered, stolen from his family and the world in an act of violence so senseless that it left gaping wounds that no music could heal. Jawara McIntosh, known to the world as Tosh 1, was born on February 8, 1980, in Kingston, Jamaica, but his life soon crossed oceans. At the age of 5, he found himself settling in Boston, Massachusetts, a city far from the warmth and mysticism of his birthplace, but one that would nonetheless become his home. It was there, in the cold distances of an American city, that Jawara's love for music took root, not as mere entertainment, but as a sacred inheritance, a duty to continue a voice silenced too soon. The shadow of Peter Tosh loomed large in Jawara's young life. By the tender age of 7, just months after his father's death, Jawara began writing, trying to capture the swirling emotions and unanswered questions that haunted his childhood. He wasn't merely scribbling verses. He was beginning the monumental task of preserving a legacy through his own voice. In the heavy silence left by Peter Tosh's passing away, Jawara found the faint stirrings of his own song. The influences that shaped Tosh 1 were not limited to his father. The powerful lyrics of Bunny Wailer, the universal messages of Bob Marley, the foundation reggae that bore the cries of resistance from Jamaica's marginalized, these became the building blocks of his artistic identity. Yet, while he stood on the shoulders of giants, Jawara McIntosh never sought to merely imitate. He yearned to craft something new, something that honored the past while shouting to the future. As he grew into his own artistry, Jawara approached his mission with solemn reverence. His first significant work, a remake of Peter Tosh's You Can't Blame the Youth, was more than a cover. It was a resurrection. Through his commanding voice and incisive lyrics, he channeled the spirit of Peter Tosh, delivering to a new generation the same unflinching truths that his father had proclaimed. Jawara was not content to be a carbon copy. He infused his work with his own voice, his own experiences, his own vision of the world. Music was his primary language, but struggle was his dialect. Armed with an economics degree and the heart of a revolutionary, Tosh 1 set about delivering his message without compromise. Whether on small stages like Boston's Paradise Rock Club, where his father once played, or sharing the spotlight with luminaries like Sizzla, Gregory Isaacs, and Damian Marley, he performed not for fame, but for the perpetuation of a cause. Even when audiences barely knew his name, Jawara's magnetic energy and righteous fervor ignited the room. Tragically, the struggle that had defined his music soon bled into his personal life in a most brutal fashion. Arrested on illegal drug possession charges in Bergen County, New Jersey, a bitter irony for a man who had dedicated much of his life to advocating for herb legalization. Jawara was serving a mere 6-month sentence when he was assaulted by a fellow inmate. The attack was not a simple altercation. It was a savage beating that left Jawara with catastrophic brain injuries, robbing him of the ability to speak, move, and ultimately to live as he once had. The perpetrator, Kyrie Sharon Bowell, was eventually convicted, but no amount of judicial reckoning could erase the devastation wrought upon Jawara and his family. Melody Cunningham, Jawara's mother, fought valiantly for justice, stating at a press gathering that the family's battle had only begun. They would not allow the brutal assault of Jawara McIntosh to become just another statistic, another forgotten casualty of a broken system. They would fight not only for his memory, but for every soul trampled under the weight of institutional indifference. Jawara lingered in this state of suspended suffering for over 3 years before finally succumbing to his injuries on July 17, 2020. He was 40 years old, a man in the prime of his creative life, silenced not by the slow wear of time, but by the sudden brutality of violence. His death was not just a private tragedy, but a public indictment of a system that punishes nonviolent offenders with callous disregard for their humanity. The McIntosh family, refusing to let his death fade into obscurity, turned their grief into activism. Nyambai McIntosh, Jawara's sister and the administrator of the Peter Tosh estate, emerged as a fierce advocate for justice, continuing the work their father and brother had begun. She spoke boldly on issues of herb legalization, systemic injustice, and the inhumanity that pervades the prison industrial complex. Through Instagram posts and public appearances, she condemned the contradictions of a society that fills prisons with nonviolent offenders while murderers roam free. The fight, however, is far from over. Jawara's story has become a rallying cry, a potent reminder that the forces of oppression have merely adapted, not disappeared. The McIntosh family supports legislation like New Jersey Senator Cory Booker's Herb Justice Act, seeking to reform the very laws that ensnare Jawara. They advocate tirelessly for the voiceless, demanding that the blood of victims no longer stain the hands of a silent society. This relentless pursuit of justice is not merely for the sake of Jawara McIntosh's memory, but for the countless others who suffer unseen. It is a continuation of the same struggle that Peter Tosh embodied when he lit his herb spliff on stage at the 1978 One Love Peace concert, defiantly calling out political leaders Michael Manley and Edward Seaga for their failure to enact meaningful reform. It is a reminder that history does not merely repeat itself. It echoes in the lives of those brave enough to listen and act. The brutality that claimed Jawara's life is not an isolated tragedy, but part of a long, bloody lineage of resistance and repression. When Peter Tosh was arrested in 1978, he endured savage beatings at the hands of police, suffering a broken hand and head injuries that required stitches. The scars of that violence never truly faded, and they resurfaced cruelly and chillingly in the life of his son decades later. The world has changed since Peter Tosh first sang of legalization and liberation, but change has been slow and uneven. Jawara's death underscores that progress is not inevitable. It must be fought for, claimed, and defended. His life and death are testimonies to the price of that fight, a price that for the McIntosh family has been paid in blood and sorrow. As Jawara lay bedridden, the vibrancy that once defined him reduced to stillness. His family rallied around him, not merely his loved ones, but as soldiers in a war that Peter Tosh had once waged with guitar and voice. His mother, Melody Cunningham, his sister, Nyambai McIntosh. These were not passive mourners, but active participants in a larger struggle for justice, dignity, and change. Jawara McIntosh's story is not merely about the loss of a promising musician. It is about the endurance of spirit in the face of relentless adversity. It is about the intergenerational transmission of courage, the kind that refuses to bow before oppression. It is about the unfinished business of Peter Tosh, the unyielding demand for a world in which no one is brutalized for their beliefs or imprisoned for seeking liberation. The struggle Jawara carried in his heart continues through the work of those he left behind. His music, though stilled by violence, reverberates in the hearts of all who hear it. His message, though delivered in a whisper now, echoes louder than ever in the halls of justice, in the cries for reform, in the defiant chords of reggae songs that refuse to let the fire die. Jawara McIntosh lived and died a son of resistance. His story is not just an untold chapter of reggae history. It is a reminder that the fight for justice never truly ends. It is carried forward by those who refuse to forget, who refuse to be silent, who refuse to let the blood of the victims dry unnoticed on the earth. In the final reckoning, Jawara McIntosh's life stands as a bridge between the past and the future, between the songs of Peter Tosh and the yet-to-be-sung anthems of liberation. His story is a testament to the enduring power of music, the indomitable spirit of resistance, and the unbreakable bond between a father and a son who both dared to dream of freedom in a world too often marred by brutality. What do you think? Can a legacy of resistance truly survive when tragedy repeats itself? Should families continue fighting the same battles their ancestors waged decades ago? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you. And if stories of resilience and injustice ignite something in you, make sure you subscribe so you never miss what the mainstream won't tell you.